Clerk will now report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Posey of Florida. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following. Section 416. None of the funds made available by this act may be used by the Department of Transportation to take any actions with respect to the financing of a new passenger rail project that runs from Orlando to Miami through Indian River County, Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 287, the gentleman from Florida and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All Aboard Florida was presented as a private passenger rail project that would run from Miami to Orlando and vice versa along Florida's east coast. The project was initially sold to the public as the first privately funded and operated passenger train. However, that story soon changed as All Aboard Florida decided to pursue $1.6 billion, with a B, loan from the Department of Transportation. Apparently, because the loan requires strict environmental impact study to be completed, All Aboard Florida decided to also apply for a $1.75 billion in tax-exempt private activity bonds from the Department of Transportation. The U.S. Department of Transportation has moved to green light this financing option, even though they have absolutely no statutory authority to do that. And the environmental impact study has yet to be completed. We don't even know if the project is safe or feasible yet. Furthermore, these trains will move through our small beach towns at speeds of up to 110 miles per hour with virtually nada, buffer separating it from our communities. All Aboard Florida envisions 32 trains running per day on top of 20 freight trains. It's a lot of traffic. Given how close this track is to our adjacent roads and surrounding neighborhoods, obviously there are serious safety concerns. Why should U.S. taxpayers be on the hook for this train? I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting my amendment to stop the Department of Transportation from funding this train and reserve the balance of my time. Thank you.
Gentleman reserves his time. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to claim the time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And in turn to yield to our colleague from Florida, Ms. Brown.
The gentlelady from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here we go again, trying to destroy passenger rail in this country. I don't understand why Republicans refuse to support transportation infrastructure. And let me tell the gentleman from Florida that our competition is not Georgia and it's certainly not Alabama. It is Europe, it's Japan, it's China. And the people in Florida support All Aboard Florida. This is a system that will go from Orlando to Miami. The studies indicate it is an economic boom to our state. I just, for the life of me, don't understand why, without vision, the people perish. And why is it that you can go to Europe and you can get in on a train to go from London to Paris, 2 hours, 1 hour and 15 minutes, and we don't want that same system here? Our competition is spending close to 8% of their economics for passenger rail, and we fight about 1%. Yet we can spend close to $300 billion for tax breaks, but yet we don't even want to encourage public-private partnership. Shame on you. The people in Florida need to be able to move around our state. And this is not just a Florida issue. It's a national issue. Here we are, $2 billion that could fix Amtrak, and yet we can do a tax break for close to $300 billion and don't pay for it. I don't understand. What is wrong with the people's house? Why is it that we don't support transportation infrastructure? This is not just a Florida issue. It's when we had 9/11, Amtrak was the only entity that was moving people. When we had Katrina, Amtrak, we had over 3,000 people to die because they couldn't move around the area. We need a train that leaves New Orleans to go to Orlando and on down to Miami. That is the future. Shame on you. And I yield back the balance of my time.
I yield back. Members are advised to address their comments to the chair and not to each other. Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shame on me for asking the Department of Transportation to follow the law, respect the Constitution of the United States, and make economically sound decisions. This is not a partisan issue in response to the allegation. In September, I wrote the GAO, along with my colleague from Florida, Representative Patrick Murphy, asking them to study the project to ensure taxpayer funds are not at risk. A recent independent economic analysis conducted by Dr. John Friedman concludes that even under all optimistic assumptions, AAF will generate losses of more than $100 million and will be unable to service its debt burden. Dr. Friedman has a PhD in economics, is a distinguished Brown University professor, and former Economic Council Special Assistant in the current Obama administration. The Department of Transportation has been unable to explain where they get their authority to authorize bonds for this project. That's because they don't have the authority. They say Title 23 funding has been given to the project in the past, which could trigger the bond authority, but have been unable to state where Title 23 funds were ever spent on what projects and when. So this is just common sense. Now, it might not make some congressional sense to some people, but this is common sense and a simple ask that the Department of Transportation follow the law and not violate the law to help a special interest put the taxpayers on the hook for $1.75 billion. I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting this amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Does the gentleman yield back his time?
I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from North Carolina has.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
So the gentleman from Florida is recognized.
I yield back.
Yields back his time. Question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Chairman, I ask the yeas and nays.
Does the gentleman from Florida ask for a recorded vote?
Yes, sir.
Pursuant to Clause 6, Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida will be postponed.